Hey everybody, John King with Summit Funding. Thank you for joining me for my weekly broadcast on Financial Fridays, where we talk about all things financial. And today I'm going to talk about success strategies in today's buying market. And so I'm going to talk about a lot of different topics. But first, I just want to thank you for joining me. Remind you that I do different topics every single week. And so some of these topics are going to be on housing related things. Some are going to be on just financial things. Matter of fact, a series that I've been continuing is financial lessons you should have learned in school. So if you haven't checked those out, I've got a bunch of videos, and I'll continue to do more on financial lessons that we should have learned in school, whether you need a refresher course or whether you have a school-aged kid or young adult who you think wants to learn about money and banking and finance and credit cards and car loans and all of that kind of stuff. Join me for that series as we can really help you to learn the things that you need to know to be successful with finances in today's world. So our topic today is home buying strategies in today's market. This is a big one. I want audience participation. So I've got about a half dozen people on here right now on different platforms. So please feel free to participate, ask questions. I'll start by saying, what are your concerns? As you think about today's market and you think about buying a home, whether you're watching live or you're watching recorded, give me a shout out on whatever platform you're on with a comment about what are you worried about right now? Is it interest rates? Is it housing prices? Is it a crash that's going to happen? I've had people worried about affordability. John, I'm worried I'm even going to be able to afford to make the monthly payment. I've got people worried about job losses and worried about overpaying for a home. So I'd love to hear from you on what are your concerns? What are the things that you want to talk about today? Or if you're watching recorded, what are the things that you want to make sure that I've covered or cover in a future episode on what am I worried about in today's market? And our first commenter is coming in. And well, Kathy, thank you. Kathy said all of that. Well, I appreciate that, Kathy. I'd love if you could give me anything specific, or if anybody else has anything specific. I've got an agenda of things that I want to cover today, but I'd love to hear from you right now and as we move forward on this, on what are those things that you are specifically concerned about. So as I ask you to do that, I got one more comment coming in here, Elizabeth. People overextending on their purchases. I love that. I'd love for you to give me a comment on clarifying. Is it overextending like on the home purchase and they're going to spend too much money on their monthly payment on their home? Is it overextending because of inflation and having too many other expenses that are running up and they're worried about, hey, how do I afford, even if I can afford the home? So she said, yeah, it's the home purchase and on the price of the home. Rob says, where's Rob? There's Rob. Rob says uncertainty on the future rates to refinance. I got you, bud. Like there's a lot of conversation. I'm gonna talk a little bit about it today as far as, hey, everybody says, and I don't use this saying very much, if at all, but marry the house, date the rate. Don't worry, rates are gonna drop. If any one of us were around back in 2005 and 2006, that kind of caused the crisis. It caused the crash. Was every lender you knew said, don't worry, I'll refinance you in 2 years. You just go ahead and you get yourself a 2-year fixed rate with a 2-year prepayment penalty. And when that 2 years is up, I got you, dog. I'm going to refinance your loan. No big deal. And the problem is that not only did we have issues with future interest rates, but at that time we had issues with future values. And we had values dropping significantly and people couldn't refinance. So Rob, that's a really good point. That the uncertainty about future interest rates is something that a lot of people are concerned about. And I'm going to address that a little bit. And we're going to talk about interest rates and that kind of a thing. So good news, I'm right on track with what you guys want to hear. I'm going to remind you, by the way, if you like what I'm talking about, please do me a favor and do everybody you know a favor and click the like button and click the share button. So if you're watching on YouTube, then just share it to the social media platform of your choice. If you're watching on any other platform, share this with everybody you know, because we're going to talk about a lot of really important things today in the next 55 minutes on what do you need to know to be successful in today's home buying market. So let's go ahead and dive right in. The first thing is the biggest question I ask and my clients ask, is now a good time to buy a home? And I think that's a loaded question. I don't think it's possible for me to answer that question for any of you. I think that the considerations that go into whether it's a good time or not are individual. I'm going to talk about some of those considerations today. But what I'll tell you is, in the long run, historically speaking, there has never been a bad time to buy a home. And I brought this up a couple of times in the past, and I'll say it again right now. If you could go back to 2007 at the top of the market and buy a home, knowing you had a 30-year fixed rate and you knew exactly what your monthly payment was going to be, would you do it? And my answer is 100% yes. Even though I knew that housing prices were going to fall significantly over the next few years, the fact is nobody has a crystal ball. And if I could go back and say, well, yeah, John, but I'd rather buy in 2011 when we were at the bottom, you're right. It would be better to buy in 2011. But if my choice was to not have bought a home, sitting here in 2022 and say, I could have not bought a home ever, or my only other option was to have bought a home in 2007 at the top of the market, which would I do? I would, without a doubt, have bought a home in 2007. As long as I knew that I had a fixed interest rate and I knew what monthly payment was going to be. And there's multiple reasons why. First of all, equity. The fact that the housing prices dropped, they came right back within 10 years. Now, 10 years is a long time, but within 10 years, prices came back to the peak that they were at nationally. So when people worry about, gosh, I screwed up in buying this home and I didn't time it right, what they're worried about is equity and appreciation. And for sure, if you bought in 2007, you're not buying at the right time to capitalize on short-term appreciation. But look at where prices are now compared to 2007. Significantly higher than where they were in 2007. So buying a home in 2007, if you had a fixed rate, knew what your monthly payment was, you would have a significant amount of equity now. But especially because of the other two benefits of buying a home, which have nothing to do with timing the market. They have to do with time in the market. And those two benefits are forced savings, which is every single month you're paying down principal. If you take a rent payment and a mortgage payment, your rent payment 100% goes to the landlord. Your mortgage payment, part of it goes to property taxes and homeowners insurance and interest. Part of it goes back in your pocket because you're paying down your debt. If you bought a home in 2007 on a 30-year loan, you're 15 years into that loan right now. Now, you haven't paid it off halfway because in the beginning, you're paying a majority of interest. But the fact is, you've been paying down principal every single month. But that interest that you've been paying for the last 15 years is actually the key to why it was a good idea to buy compared to rent, and that is tax savings. How much money did you leave on the table in the last 5 years, or excuse me, in the last 15 years by not buying a home? By not buying a home in 2007, you lost 15 years of tax write-offs. So you get two of the three benefits. Again, you might not have gotten a lot of appreciation in the first 5 years. You've got depreciation or loss in value, but you made it back up before the end of 10. And you had tax savings and you had forced savings by paying down principal into your own loan. So when people say is now a good time to buy, for those reasons, for those two reasons, there's never a bad time to buy. The question is, how long are you going to stay in the home? Is this something that you say, you know what, I could ride this out? If prices drop, I'll talk in a couple minutes about what I think about prices, but if prices drop, can I stick this out? That's the thing that you have to be able to decide, because people in 2007, even if you had a fixed rate loan, if you had to sell in 2010, you're upside down. And you had to sell because you're being relocated, because your job is one that you have to relocate across the country every 2 or 3 years. If that's your job right now, you may question whether now is a good time to buy a home or not, because I don't know where we're going to be in the next 2 or 3 years. I have some suspicions, and I'll explain those suspicions, but I don't know where we're going to be. I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I would have bought the winning lotto numbers, and I would not be presenting to you guys right now on YouTube. So let's talk about, is now a good time to sell a home? So first of all, it is a softening market. There is, some of you are like, John, you're crazy. This is not a softening market. It is a market that is driven by interest rates right now, and demand, the number of people wanting to buy a home, is way down. But that means that as a seller, you have to decide, how badly do you want to sell your home right now? Why do you want to sell right now? What's your purpose? If you think, oh my gosh, I want to get out before prices crash. Okay, that is certainly your prerogative. I'm explaining to you in a couple minutes why I don't think prices are going to crash. But the reality is that's the person that absolutely should sell right now. Because if you think prices are getting worse, you think Chicken Little and everything is coming to an end, go for it. But the reality is most sellers that are selling today are people who either A, think things are going to crash, or B, they have to sell. So and the reason why is because the sellers that just want to sell, they're looking at it saying, I'm not going to give up this much money in seller credits. I'm not going to put my house on for a fire sale. Now, I could have a debate with any one of you about, well, what is the definition of market value? And maybe this isn't a fire sale. Maybe this is where prices should be. But I'm going to go to the question of supply and demand. And it's that simple about supply and demand. And I've told this story many times, and I'm going to tell an abbreviated version right now. We simply don't have enough homes. And we don't have enough homes, that there are not enough homes built overall to house the number of people that need a place to live. And that is for two specific reasons. One is household formations. And the second reason is because of the slowdown in building and new construction over multiple waves since 2007. And we're in one of those waves right now. So I'm going to talk about affordability first. What is affordability? Not affordability. I'm going to talk about household formations. Household formations is an economic term where someone moves out of a house and occupies a new one without them vacating the old one. Now, let me give you a more clear understanding. I have 3 kids, my oldest being 14 years old. At some point in the next 10 years, I hope she moves out. I say that with all love and affection. So at some point, she's going to move out of the house, but we're going to stay here. So she occupied a new residence without the old home becoming available to the open market. And that is a formation of a household. The Gen Xers have delayed household formation, and they're delaying it again right now. They're postponing because they saw their grandparents and their parents lose a home in the Great Recession in 2007, 8, and 9. They are worried that housing is not a good idea. And they've seen prices go up significantly, and they're afraid we're going to do it again. But they still have to have somewhere to live. And if they need to live somewhere and they're not going to buy, they're going to rent, which is going to push up rent prices. And so as a landlord, that's a great opportunity. So if you have a home to sell, you might think about renting it out instead. But the second thing about houses right now, instead of simply talking about household formations, wow, for the second time in 2 weeks, I've totally forgot what my second thing was. I told you guys 2 things, and I told you what the 2 things were a minute ago. Somebody helped me out here in comments about why the market isn't going to crash. The first one was household formations. And one of the 10 of you that are on here are going to tell me what the second thing was that I said on what is going to stop housing from crashing. Well, until somebody tells me that, I'm going to move on, and I'm sure it's going to come back to me. But I am human, and if you didn't know it already, I proved it right here. Everything I say comes from the top of my head, and I'm not really that scripted. I know what I want to talk about. Good, I got somebody telling me. Demand. Okay, thank you. Supply and demand. Elizabeth, you are amazing. I appreciate that. So demand is not going to go, new construction. That's what it was. It was new construction. So you have household formations that is creating demand. And then we have the fact that there's, thank you, Penny, lack of inventory. So it is the number of homes that have been built. So if we go back to 2007, when the market crashed through the Great Recession, you had builders pull out. And the reason why is because builders cannot build a home and hold it. Builders have to build a home and sell it immediately. And builders paused for 7 or 8 years, paused not completely, but they slowed way down. And then they built from about 2015 to 2022, and now they're hitting the pause button again. Builders have stopped building en masse. The number of new permits that have been pulled are going down significantly. So our problem is builders are not creating inventory, yet households are being formed, and that's putting pressure on rents. So we're going to see rents continue to go up as we have more and more people who are renting and not wanting to make the decision to buy. So when you think about, is now a good time to sell a home? If you need to sell a home, go for it. But as soon as interest rates come back down at all, that pent-up demand is going to jump right back into the market. And at that point, there isn't enough supply to meet the demand of people that want to buy homes. And so the prices are going to go back up. How quickly they're going to go up is really going to be a lever that's going to have to do with interest rates. And I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. So let's move on to, is now a good time to buy and sell a home at the same time? And the answer is, or sell and buy at the same time. My answer is 100% yes. Because for the same dynamics I just talked about, we're going to see the market pick up at some point down the road, because you have so many households being formed that need a place to live. And even if rates never drop, hear me out, even if rates never drop, everybody starts renting, rental prices keep going up and keep going up and keep going up. And guess what? At a certain point, it's more expensive to rent than buy at a 7% interest rate. By the way, interest rates are over 7%. So it is cheaper to buy at a 7% interest rate than to rent at some point in the future, even if rates never go down, because rent amounts will continue to increase. That's the dynamic that is going to prevent a crash. There just plain aren't enough homes. But the key is strategies to succeed in today's market. If you have a home that you need to sell and you want to buy another home at the same time, that was super hard to do in 2020 and 2021. It is a much easier process to get done right now. So if that's your situation, I would strongly suggest you think about it. So let's talk about the biggest challenge right now. The biggest challenge is affordability. And somebody said that earlier in one of the comments. It was Elizabeth that said earlier that she's worried about people overextending on their purchase. And affordability is one of my biggest concerns. I talked to a client yesterday who owns a house that he thinks is worth about $470,000, maybe $500,000, but that was based on what his realtor told him back in July. And he has a payment of about $1,800 a month. He wants to sell it, invest all of the money from the sale of that home into a new home that he thinks is about $100,000 more expensive. He wants to buy about a $600,000 home. So he's only upgrading by $100,000. His monthly payment is going to go from $1,800 a month to $3,200 a month. His income will only support $2,300 a month. Let's think about that for a second. That's an affordability crisis. That is what we're dealing with today. Is he wants to buy a home, he wants to upgrade, he is happy to do it, understands that it's going to be a higher interest rate, but didn't understand the math. And the truth is he's got other income coming in and probably could qualify for that $3,000 a month, or could afford that $3,200 a month payment, but we can't use that other person on the loan. So he doesn't even qualify for the loan. But the fact is, for a lot of people, they simply can't afford to write the check. That is our biggest challenge today. And I see a lot of people who are robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're trying to figure out any way they possibly can to afford to buy a home and make that mortgage payment. And they're being told, oh my gosh, I should just date the rate. Don't worry, rates are going to come down. And as Rob said, there's nobody certain about where interest rates are going to go. Rob, you're 100% spot on. Nobody knows where interest rates are going to go. And so how do we manage that process? How do we deal with that? Well, the truth is, if you can't afford the payment today, you shouldn't buy the house. If you cannot afford the payment today, you shouldn't buy the house. Now, there's a lot of people who have a distorted definition of affording the payment. There's a lot of people who say, I want to be able to afford the payment only on one income, because what if my husband or wife lost their job? I don't want to be stuck in a position where I can't afford the home. Well, guess what? A single person buying a home would never own a home in that case, would they? Because what if I lost my job? I don't have any backup person. We are a dual income society in most situations. So stop being overly conservative. Stop saying, you know what? I'm worried about what could happen. All good things in life live on the other side of fear. All good things in life live on the other side of fear. So you need to decide, am I willing to take on the worry of what if somebody lost their job? Now, if you know your job's at risk, don't buy a home. If you cannot afford the loan today, do not buy the home. But if you're saying, well, you know, we both make $100,000 a year and we only want to qualify off of one of our incomes, guess what? If one of you lost your job, That one could go get another job and make 50,000 a year, and you're still making 150. So maybe you're not stretching yourself to a house for a $200,000 a year job household, but you can buy a house that maybe requires $150,000 a year of income, because when you lose a job, you're rarely fully unemployed. You just become underemployed. You don't get paid as much in a different industry or a new job as what you did before is really the worry. For very few people, the worry is, I'm going to be completely unemployed. Here's the other distorted view about affordability. And that is, do I invest or save a lot of money into other things? And if you do, you have to understand the concept of leverage. Nothing gives you a greater return on investment than home ownership because of leverage. Because when a home appreciates by 5%, that doesn't mean your down payment money appreciated by 5%. It means the entire value of the home did. So if you're worried about affordability, saying, I can't afford to spend $4,000 a month. And I say, well, where's your money going right now? Well, I've got $3,000 a month that's going towards rent, and I can't afford to pay more than that. What about all the money you're putting into savings right now? Well, yeah, but I want to keep doing that because that's how I built up my savings account, and I now have $30,000 in the bank. But if you cut back on the money, rainy day fund is super important. I'm not talking about getting rid of your rainy day fund, but I'm talking about slowing down or suspending the money you're putting into savings. Because guess what? You are now shifting the savings, and instead of putting it into your savings account, you're putting it into the equity you're building in your home. It's a different type of savings, and it utilizes leverage so that your money is growing exponentially. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I'm passionate about it. So if you or someone you know are not buying a home because I can't afford it, but you're putting a whole bunch of money away in savings over here and savings over there, guess what? We save for something. You cannot take it with you. So you've saved for this opportunity, the opportunity to buy a home. And when you buy this home, your savings just shifts into the home. It's not as liquid. You can't get to it as quickly, but it's still wealth building long term. And if you've done a good job of savings, then keep that money in savings so that you have that as a rainy day fund. But use your monthly income to pay for a home instead of using it to pay for rent plus additional savings. You will make way more money in the long run. And again, it's not about time in the market. It's about time in the market. One of the biggest questions I ask people right now is, why do you want to be a homeowner? Why? This is a tough market. It's a tough time to get a home. It's a tough time to get qualified for a home. Interest rates are super high. Mortgage guidelines are strict. Mortgage companies are closing left and right. It is a very, very challenging real estate market. And so when I talk to people about buying a home, think about your why. Think about what is it about home ownership that's worthwhile to me. Now, I've got a lot of videos I've done in the past. I'm not going to go too deep into this today, but there's a lot of questions about, why am I buying a home? What's in it for me? What's my value? What's my purpose? What's my benefit? Know what that is. And if it's strong enough, then do what it takes to get there. Because I have never talked to anybody who says, oh man, I really wish that I was never a homeowner. The truth is, homeownership is challenging, but the rewards are huge. And it's actually, what's funny is, it's the people I have talked to, some people who say, man, homeownership was not for me. Well, part of it's because they tried to time the market. And part of it is maybe they had some bad circumstances come up. They lost a job. They got stuck in the housing crisis. But the big picture is, from a wealth building perspective, think about why you want to own a home and really hone in on that. If it isn't that important to you, then hey, who cares if you don't buy today, you don't buy 2 years from now, who cares? But what you want to think about is, what are your short and long-term considerations? What do I mean by that? I mean that if you're thinking about buying a home today, you have to think, why do I want to buy a home short-term? Why do I want to buy a home long-term? And sometimes you lose short-term to gain long-term. We're in one of those markets right now. For a lot of people, it's going to take a step backwards. It's going to cost you more to buy than it would be to stay where you're at renting. And so you have to understand, what are the long-term benefits and the short-term benefits? Yes, you get tax savings. Your tax savings doesn't kick in really big until the first full year that you own a home. So if you buy a home right now, you're actually not going to save any money until you file your taxes in 2024, because you got the whole year of 23 of paying interest and taxes before you actually see that benefit. And so you've got to figure out, what are my reasons for, is it about having stability in the place where I'm going to live? Is it about providing the right school district for my kids? Is it about not wanting your kids to grow up like you did, where you had to bounce from house to house every 2 or 3 or 5 years, and you want them to have a room that's their room for their entire life? All of those things matter. You have to decide what matters to you, and you have to separate them into short and long term. Here's the deal. No matter how good the long term is, if the short term is so bad that you cannot make it to the long term, then the long term doesn't matter. I have people all the time saying, oh my gosh, John, I'm not going to buy a home unless I can do a 15-year loan. Dave Ramsey says only do 15-year mortgages. Okay, that is a super, super smart long-term consideration. You pay a lot less interest on a 15-year mortgage than you do on a 30. So if you buy a home on a 15-year loan, short term, you have a significantly higher payment. And if you did that and you stretched yourself and you lost a little bit of income, you had some expenses that came up that you didn't plan for, and now in the short term, you can't afford to make your payment and your home is foreclosed upon. Did you ever get the long-term benefit? No. Instead, you had, hey, I was following a plan that helped me long-term, but I failed short-term and I never saw the long-term benefit. So do not ignore the short-term challenges thinking, well, I'll figure that out because the long-term is all that matters. You have to decide, can I survive? Do I have a rainy day fund? Do I have a backup plan? Can I suspend my 401k contribution if things get tight? Can I pull money out of my 401k if things get tight? You have to have a backup plan financially. For a lot of people, I'll tell you right now, if you're a homeowner, you need to go get a home equity line of credit. It's a great backup plan. I don't expect prices to drop significantly. I don't think we're going to deal with what we dealt with in 2007 and 2008, where banks were cutting or suspending home equity lines of credit. But I think that what we're going to find is that money's going to get tighter. As we head into the recession, things are going to get tighter. And sometimes having the ability to borrow short term and pay it back is the difference between success and failure. So remember the long and the short term considerations. All right, let's shift gears. We got 30 minutes left. I want to dive into the meat of some of this stuff. So what is happening with interest rates? Well, they're continuing to go up, and they're going to continue going up for the foreseeable future. We are officially over 7. If you look back at kind of the history of rates this year, they went up from about March and they kept going up and up and up. And in June, they hit their peak, and they peaked at around about 6.25. And then they came back down to 5.25, maybe even 4.99. By August, they had dropped, and then they shot back up again. And we've gone from 4.99 to 5.25 in August, and here we are 60 days later, and we've shot straight back through the 5s, through the 6s, and we're landing in the 7s. The question is, are we going to go higher? I don't know. I think we have more challenges in our short term, which means if you're thinking about buying a home, the question becomes, how soon do I do it? How soon do I buy homes? Because I'm worried rates are going to keep going up. And so there's a very clear relationship between rising and falling rates and house prices. And I see it, and I hope that after I explain it, you guys do too. The problem, it goes back to affordability. The problem is you've got somebody who was looking at a home when rates were at 4.5%. Well, let's back up to the beginning. The rates are in the 2s. You had somebody looking at a home a year ago, and a $3,000 a month house payment could buy you a $600,000 home. I don't know. I'm giving you theoretical, probably more than that. So anyway, let's just use that example. A $3,000 house payment buys you a $600,000 home. And then rates go to 4%. And now that $3,000 house payment might only buy you a $550,000 home. And then the rates go up over to 5.5%. And now it's $500,000 home that payment gets you to. And the key about home buyers is your qualification is not for a particular home price. You're qualified for a particular monthly payment. And the truth is, you are targeting a particular monthly payment. When you go out shopping for a home, you're not shopping for a $700,000 home. You're shopping for a payment you can afford. And as mortgage interest rates have gone up, that payment that somebody can afford buys less house, which means that person has three options. Don't buy because, hey, I can't get the house I want. Or they spend more per month to get the house that they really want. Or they have to say, hey, I need to negotiate with the seller. Or maybe I'll look in a different neighborhood and buy a less expensive home because, hey, I can only buy at $500,000. And so I'm going to buy in a lower quality neighborhood. I'm going to buy a smaller home in that neighborhood. But the truth is, a lot of people can't make that adjustment, can't make that change because they have to have a certain size home. So when that person says, I can only afford $3,000 a month, and I only want to I have to have a 4-bedroom house because of the size of my family, and I could buy a house at $600,000 when rates were at 2.5. Now that rates are at 7.5, their buying power is $450,000, which means a lot of the sellers in that price range have to still appeal to the same buyer. Think about it. If you think about it, and let me give you a different example here. If you think about cars, you have a certain person that, hey, I like to drive this type of car. I want to drive a luxury car. I want to drive a Honda. I want to drive whatever. And that person is out shopping for that car. And they want that car because that's the status I want. That's the speed of a car I want, whatever it happens to be. But if interest rates go up, car dealers are saying, well, the problem is that I got to now sell my Toyotas to the people that were buying Lexuses before, because the payment on a Toyota is now equal to what the payment used to be on a Lexus. Guess what? The Lexus buyers don't want to drive a Toyota. They want to drive a Lexus. So they have to get creative. They have to either lower the price of the car, they have to get creative with financing and get you a lease so that the monthly payment fits into play, but they won't be able to sell the Lexus buyer on a Toyota vehicle. And the same is true in the housing market. That's why prices are going down, because there aren't buyers at that price anymore that can afford that payment. The payment has gone up. Their target price has gone down, but the same buyer still wants your home. So we're going to see prices continue to drop as interest rates continue to rise. Now, that's an opinion, but it's a pretty well correlated opinion based on what I just talked about. So the opposite is also going to be true. We saw it even in the summertime between June and August, we saw interest rates come back down from 6.25 down to 4.99. And I saw a lot of people jump in and buy at that time. And that was great. But now they've gone up, fewer people are buying. There's less transactions happening. And we're going to see housing prices teeter-totter with it. So when, and this is to Rob's point, Rob said, and I brought it up a couple times, we don't know when interest rates are going to drop. But here's the deal. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is permanent. And when we look at this interest rate rise and people are going to say, oh my gosh, they're just going back to normal. Are you saying we ignore the last 25 years? Because interest rates have been dropping for the last 25 years. Matter of fact, since 1994, really the last almost 28 years, interest rates have been dropping with a couple of exceptions, but the exceptions were short. We had rates skyrocket in the 70s, but that was because inflation and policy were out of whack. And some people are saying we're heading into that again. I don't think we are. I think the Federal Reserve's made it clear we're going to keep raising rates to kill inflation, which is the same thing Paul Volcker did in 1980 and 1981. He was the head of the Federal Reserve. So we're following the same pattern, and life is about patterns. Okay, history may not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. Mark Twain said that. So we're not in an environment that is uncharted territory. We've seen this happen before. And the current Fed is trying to do exactly what Paul Volcker did back in 1980 and 81, which is shock the market, raise rates up as much as it takes to shock the market. And hopefully he does what Volcker did, which is immediately start lowering them once the market is showing signs of weakening. That's the unknown. If he doesn't lower rates quick enough, we're going to go into a super deep recession. And the fact is that this market is a global economy more than it ever has been. And every single economy across the world is struggling right now. Normally in a recession, there's at least one or two good economies that pull the rest of the world out of it by buying all of their goods and services. There isn't anybody right now to pull us out of it. And so my fear is we're going to go into a deeper and longer recession than anybody expects. But guess what? In a recession, in every recession in the past, interest rates are lower at the end of the recession than they were at the beginning. So Rob, we don't know when that's going to happen, but I have zero expectation that rates are going to stay up here permanently. There's an argument to be said we're going to see lower rates in the next 12 months. I'm not telling anybody to count on that, but I can see that happening. I think that we should reasonably expect rates to go back down, not to 2.5, but below 5%. I think we'll see below 5% for sure in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think there's a good chance it's going to happen sooner. So let's talk about some strategies to succeed today. So first of all, it is a great time to buy using down payment assistance. The challenge is that the down payment assistance programs are hobbled because of interest rates, but there's still some good programs out there. Cal HFA is an amazing program that will give you 3.5% of your purchase price towards your down payment, but they don't have any money right now for closing costs. So how do we cover closing costs? We negotiate seller credits. It's an amazing opportunity. I actually think that every realtor on every transaction should be asking for anywhere from 2 to 3% as a credit from the seller towards closing costs, because there is no such thing right now as a 0-point mortgage. Again, I've done videos on this before. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water here. You'll see on my YouTube channel videos about rates and how they've been playing out. And what we're seeing is the mortgage market is not writing a check up front, hoping to collect money and interest later. Mortgage companies, the mortgage industry, Wall Street, makes money on mortgages in two ways. They make it by you writing us a check up front, or they make it by you paying interest over the life of the loan. Wall Street's pretty convinced that rates are going to drop and that people are going to refinance in the next 1 to 2 to 3 years. So they know they're not going to make money over the life of the loan and interest. So they want their money up front. That's the bad news. So negotiate it as a seller credit. Build it into the purchase price. In a lot of cases, you can actually offer the list price, but get a concession to a seller credit. Sellers are emotional. If you can appeal to the seller's need to win by giving them full price, but you get a win by asking for a large seller credit, everybody comes out ahead. And most of the time, the buyer ends up saving more money by using the buy down to get a lower interest rate or a temporary buy down than they would by lowering the purchase price. So I strongly encourage every single buyer right now to negotiate seller credits on every transaction, no matter how big your down payment is, because the state of California limits how much of your money I can use to buy down your interest rate. But the state doesn't limit how much of the seller's money I can use. So there's a lot of options you have when you use seller credits and how we use those to buy down interest rates. The question becomes, how much should you buy down? Well, let's think about what I said a minute ago. Wall Street, the mortgage industry, is unwilling to just make profit off of interest over the life of loans they're doing right now, because they have no expectation those loans are actually going to stick around very long. They expect interest rates to fall also. So why would you spend a lot of money to lower your interest rate in the long run with what's called a permanent buy down? Now, I said a 0-point loan doesn't exist because you have to pay Wall Street to take the loan. They have to make some profit right now. But a lot of people say, John, how much can I buy it down further? I really want to buy it down. I had a client yesterday, we were talking about numbers. They ended up taking a rate in the high 7s because it saved them so much money in upfront cost that it was better for them, because they think that, you know what, we think interest rates are going to fall and we'd rather save our money now up front and be able to refinance later. Everything's a gamble. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but I caution you against excessive buy downs, because when you do a permanent rate buy down, that money is spent. If you spent $1,000 to save $10 a month, and you're saying, well, gosh, John, every year I'm going to save $120, and in 10 years I'll have saved $1,200. This is a 30-year mortgage. I'm spending $1,000 and I'm going to save $3,600 a month off of my interest. $3,600 over the term off of my interest. Yeah, but how long are you going to keep that loan? The truth is, you may keep it only for 2 years, which means you've saved $240 and you spent $1,000 buying down that interest rate. That's not a good return on investment. So use the seller credit to buy down what is necessary, and then don't buy down more than you need to. Maybe you look at doing a temporary buy down with the rest of the money. John, what's a temporary buy down? A temporary buy down allows you to get a significantly lower payments by using the seller's money to supplement your payment for the first 1, 2, or 3 years. So if today's rate is 7%, there's a 2-year buy down that lowers the rate by 2% the first year and 1% the second year. So you'd be paying 5% interest the first year, 6% interest the second year, and 7% interest for the rest of the life. But you're asking, John, what's really the big difference? I still had a whole bunch of money set aside for that buy down that I would lose if I refinanced in 6 months or a year. No, with a temporary buy down, the seller's money is actually set aside in a separate account waiting to supplement your payments. It's not spent buying down the rate permanently. It's simply held temporarily in a fund by us that is used to cover that additional interest every single month for the next 2 years. If you refinance before that money has been extinguished, we pay that money towards your principal balance. You get every benefit of those dollars. So a strategy to succeed in today's market is to get a large seller credit, 2, 3, 4, 6%, depending upon the loan program, and then use it for partially for permanent buy down and partially for temporary buy down. And I'm an expert in helping you navigate those waters. All right, what's the next strategy? Well, it's kind of a reminder. Everybody thinks houses are on sale right now and you can get a deal. A well-priced home will still sell at or above list price, especially a well-conditioned home in good condition. You're still selling at or above list price. So Elizabeth, I saw your question. I'll get to it in a second. By the way, gang, feel free to ask questions at any point in time. I will address them as we go. A well-priced home, you're not going to get for below asking price. A well-priced home, you're not going to get with a seller credit unless you're offering extra. So trust your realtor. Find a great realtor. If you need help finding one, call me. I'll help you. Find a great realtor and trust your realtor. Part of it has to do with how long the house has been on the market, what the history is of price reductions. A house on the market for 60 days might still have to offer more than asking price. If they just dropped the asking price and there's a whole bunch of people that are circling the house now, what you should have done was written your offer before they dropped the price. Nobody's looking at that house. So the key is, if you want to get a deal on a home, look for a home that has been on the market for a little while without any price reductions, and your realtor can help you navigate those waters. All right, so we're going to go back to interest rate buy downs. Elizabeth Vieira from Facebook asks, when asking for a seller credit for temporary buy down, what's the best wording on the contract? You don't even have to call it for a temporary buy down. It's a part of the closing costs. So use the same language you've always used, which is, buyer requesting, there's a California purchase agreement on the top of page 2, says what the credit is for. The wording is already there. So you just plug it in right there and you're asking for a dollar amount and a percentage. Again, check with me. I've got a great cheat sheet that tells you what loan programs and what percentage you're allowed to get as a maximum, but you don't have to call it anything special. It's just a seller credit towards closing costs. I then get to choose, with the buyer's help, how we apply that seller credit and towards which closing costs. The temporary buy down is one of the closing costs that we can apply it towards. Hopefully that helps. If it doesn't, then post another question and I'll clarify. All right, so let's talk about the home buying process. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to bring up a slide deck kind of talking about the home buying process. I threw this at Anna right at the end here, so there's some formatting issues on here. My fault, 100%. But the home buying process, it is, let's go back, Anna. The home buying process is tougher today than it's ever been. The economy's in flux, inflation, guidelines are changing, and basically we're still dealing with the aftermath of the fact that the mortgage industry caused the collapse of the global economy back in 2007 and 2008. And so the full weight of the federal government came down upon us, and we have super, super strict guidelines, and those have not stopped. But we're adding to that the challenges of liquidity. Mortgage companies are literally going out of business as we speak. So you have to be super careful in today's market. An important strategy is, who do you choose to trust to do your mortgage? Now, you might think, well, John, I want to do my mortgage with one of those companies that's going to go out of business, because once they go out of business, no more mortgage. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. You still owe the money. It's owed to Wall Street. The bankruptcy judge will transfer the servicing to somebody else. You still owe your payment. But the deal is, what if that bank or mortgage company goes out of business before you get your keys? You've got to start over with another company. If they run out of money, everybody in the mortgage world funds their loans using a line of credit. It's a big old American Express card. And a lot of mortgage companies are having their lines of credit cut off. They don't have money anymore to fund their loans. And so the morning they're trying to fund your loan, they swipe the American Express card and they get the declined signal, that pit in your stomach. Oh my God, I just swiped my credit card at the grocery store and it didn't work. Well, mortgage companies are having that pit in their stomach literally as we speak, wondering if they have the money to fund the loan. So make sure you're using the right company to do your mortgage. Here's the deal. A mortgage is like getting a home loan is like taking an airplane trip across the country. And when you think about flying across the country, you hope that you get a great pilot, but the truth is that no matter who your pilot is, it doesn't really matter. Autopilot does the work most of the time. Unless you happen to be on Sully Sullenberg's flight that landed on the Hudson River, in which case you would be super glad that you had that level of experience as your pilot. Why do I say that? Because who you choose to do your loan matters. Who you choose to be your realtor matters. And it matters more today than it has ever mattered in the recent past, because there are more challenges happening today with loans and with real estate than has been happening at any time in the past. Having the right guidance, having the right advice matters, because your pilot will be there to make sure that they land you safely and that they keep you informed throughout the process. So just understand, you don't know what turbulence is going to happen, but having the right team on your side matters. So I want to talk about kind of the whole process. Anna, can we make this one bigger? So the process of buying a home starts with, let's get rid of this banner. The process of buying a home starts with getting pre-qualified. Now there's actually 3 ways that you can do that. It's called pre-qualification, pre-approval, and fully underwritten pre-approval. And it's critical to understand the difference, because getting pre-qualified simply means, oh, well, I told them I made this much money. I had a client who was working with the biggest mortgage lender in the country. I won't name them because I'm about to talk bad about them, but they're working with the biggest mortgage company in the nation online. And that client called the bank and said, hey, I make $8,000 a month. And they said, okay, cool. And they ran through some numbers and they said, okay, hey, you're qualified. Here's your approval letter. And then they come back with a contract and they said, okay, cool. Hey, I need to get your tax returns to approve it. Oh, okay. Send his tax returns. Yeah, he made $8,000 a month. He made $96,000 in revenue. He owned his own business and he received $8,000 a month, but he spent $6,000 in expenses. So he only had $24,000 of profit. Now, he said those expenses aren't real. That's just what I put on there for the IRS. My business costs next to nothing to run. I make $8,000 a month and I can use all that money to pay my mortgage. That's not how the industry works. So don't just get pre-qualified. You cannot push a button and get mortgage, especially in today's market. So make sure that you at least have a pre-approval, because a pre-approval is a lender going through and looking at all of your paperwork. I'm not going to hand you a letter the same day that you call me. So call me early. Don't call me the day you have a house that's perfect, that everybody's writing an offer on, and you need to write that offer in 30 seconds, because I'm not going to give you the letter, because all I'm going to do is fail you by doing that. You need to understand that getting a pre-approval is the minimum expectation. And it's even better if we go one step further and get it fully underwritten, because a fully underwritten pre-approval means that you have had an underwriter look at it, and they're the ones that are the final decision maker. And that makes your offer even stronger when you're presenting to the seller and saying, I have a fully underwritten pre-approval. Anna, can you make that bigger for me? So what we're looking at now is we're looking at the next step, which is shopping and finding your home. And what I'll tell you right now is going online and going to Zillow or going to Redfin or going to realtor.com and doing it yourself. You can find listings. That's not the hard part. The hard part is understanding everything about the home, the neighborhood, knowing which ones actually have the features that you want or need. That's where you need a human. That's where you need a realtor, and you need an amazing realtor helping you out. And you need one, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5. You need one amazing realtor. Pick your horse and ride it to the end. If you don't like your realtor, then fire them by saying, I'm sorry, it's not working for me. I need to go work with somebody else. But do not change realtors every single weekend because, well, this guy said he could show me the house and that guy will show me the house. You need to make sure you've got a professional that understands this market, because the ability to negotiate in this market is critical. Overpaying for a house. Somebody said one of their worries was, well, I don't know. Somebody said overpaying on a home was one of the issues. And the fact of the matter is, overpaying on a home is a problem of the real estate agent you have hired. Now, the realtor can't tell you where prices are going to go, but the realtor can help you negotiate the right price and help you understand if that home is underpriced, accurately priced, or overpriced. So find a great realtor and stick with that realtor as you are shopping for a home. All right, the next step in the process is once you get your offer accepted is when we lock in your interest rate. So be really clear, interest rates change all the time. There are options. We can lock in interest rate early. There's a program where we can lock and then shop for a home, but you only have a finite period of time to find that home. And if that offer is not accepted in that time frame, you had to write a check up front for a deposit to me to lock in that rate. And if you don't find a home within that time frame, not only did you lose your rate, you lost your deposits. So I'm not a huge fan of those with there's a lack of inventory. It's kind of funny. There's a lot of houses for sale, but there aren't that many houses that you want. That's what I hear from everybody. There's a bunch of homes, but nothing I want. And there's not much more inventory coming on. Why? Why are people not listing their home right now? For all the reasons I've said already, and I'll repeat very briefly, which is sellers don't have to sell because they've got a super good interest rate. And they're worried that, hey, if I sell right now, I'm selling at a discount. And I believe they're right. And so you're not going to see a lot more inventory coming on. Last week I did a video and I talked about the great freeze, and that's what we're dealing with, is the great freeze that's going on. So you need to be aware that interest rates will fluctuate, and that I don't think it's a good idea to try and lock ahead of time unless you know specifically that you're going to do whatever it takes to buy a home within that time frame. The next step, once you get your offer accepted, we go into processing and underwriting. We re-verify everything all over again. We're going to drive you crazy. And then finally, once we've done that, you sign your documents and you move into your home. So why do I say all of this? Because I want to educate you on an understanding of the different loan programs and how things are playing out in today's market. What this chart kind of shows you is three different categories: conventional loans, government loans, FHA, USDA, and VA, and jumbo loans. And those three categories all have different rules. They look at your cash, your ideal credit, your minimum credit, your income. They look at it all different. This chart, for most people, would blow their mind. They don't understand all the moving pieces of it. And that's where you have to have an expert. Not push a button and let a computer tell you, because the computer doesn't understand what your goals are long and short term. So you need an expert to navigate those waters, especially when it comes to closing costs. Because most people don't understand that, hey, when I buy a home, I might have 3.5% down, but where can that money come from? You don't notice cash on here. You can't bring money in from cash. So you need to have an expert that shows you how do you navigate these waters. And the sooner you talk to that expert, the sooner you talk to me, the better off you are. And most people don't understand closing costs. Closing costs have gone up, not down. I talked earlier about the fact that banks are not willing to wait to make their profit because they don't think you're going to keep the loan very long. So instead, they want their profit, or at least some profit up front. And that means that closing costs are going up. That means if you don't have the right strategy, if you're not asking for seller credits, you're covering that out of pocket. And the state of California limits how much you can pay out of pocket, which means you're kind of stuck paying a significantly higher interest rate, even if you didn't want to. So make sure you've got really good counsel in helping guide you in this market, because things are very, very different than what they normally look like. All right. The other thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about interest rates and kind of how rates are determined. I think this is something that a lot of people don't understand. People look at the interest rate market and they say, hey, interest rates are interest rates. Everybody gets the same rate. That is just not true. Interest rates have different components. They're called price adjusters. There's differences in loan programs. There's one, people always say to me, John, number 26, citizenship. You're telling me that you're going to charge me a different interest rate if I'm not a citizen? No, but I might not qualify you for the same loan program. So certain programs require certain levels of citizenship documentation. And if you're a visa holder, or if you're a non-permanent resident alien, you may not qualify for certain programs because it requires a certain level of residency. And those other programs are going to be higher interest rates. So understand, even as simple as are taxes and insurance included in my payment or not. Everybody understands credit history matters to your interest rate, but most people don't understand that whether you put taxes and insurance in your payment will make a difference in your interest rate. So when you look out there and you say, oh my gosh, I just saw the federal government released interest rates, and I'm going to talk about interest rates a little bit further. By the way, gang, we're almost out of time. We're closing up the top of the hour. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about interest rates. If you're watching live and you have any questions about what I've talked about, anything you want me to comment on, please put it in the comments. If you know there's something that you got as great value out of this, I'd love to hear that as well. So while I'm finishing up talking about the interest rate market and kind of how all of this works, I want you to comment and tell me kind of either what questions you have or what you learned. But here's the deal with interest rates. Interest rates are not just one rate. You get an interest rate published once a week, and the media talks about that rate. And that rate is published every week on Thursday. Actually, yeah, Thursday. That rate is a survey from mortgage lenders. The survey is sent to them on Monday, and they have until Tuesday to respond. Rates change daily. So if you were trying to track gas prices and you were saying, well, what are gas prices at right now? And you asked a bunch of gas stations on Monday to tell us what gas prices are Monday or Tuesday, you reply whatever day you want, and then you report that on Thursday. Guess what? That has nothing to do with where interest rates are or gas prices are on Thursday. The market is moving. It is more volatile now than I've ever seen in my 22-year career. The rate market is more volatile than I've ever seen in my 22-year career. I've had people ask me my entire career, hey, John, I'm worried about interest rates while I'm shopping for a home. You know, rates are at 4 right now, and I'm worried they'll go to 5 before I find a home. And I always said, look, you don't understand how rates work. When rates move, they might move by 0.1 or 0.2%. A move of 0.3% would be huge. That just never happens. I mean, it takes a year for interest rates to move 0.5%. So don't worry, that's not going to happen. Guess what? We've moved from 2.5% to 7.25% in 8 months. We went from 4.99 60 days ago to 7.25% today. We had a 2.25% interest rate. I quoted a client an interest rate of 5.125 back in August. That same down payment assistance program yesterday had a rate of 7.25. We're talking about a 2% increase in interest rates in 60 days. That's 1% increase per day. And that's after we had a huge amount of increase between March and June. So we're seeing a significant run up. But guess what? What comes up really, really quickly typically comes down really, really quickly. You look at the stock market, it shoots up and it's gone back down. You look at lots of different markets and lots of different cycles. And the fact is, nothing stays the same for a long period of time except human nature. And human nature is to assume that whatever is happening today will continue forever. Stop it. That is not how things work. Things change, things evolve, things ebb and they flow, things go up and they go down, but they move back to the average of where it's been. And that's what's going to happen with interest rates, and that's what's going to happen with housing. Hopefully this has been valuable. In the last minute here, nobody has commented on anything. So if you have anything to comment, speak now or forever hold your peace. Gang, I really appreciate you joining me. If you have any questions about anything, please reach out to me directly. I do get paid to do mortgages. I'm not a paid YouTube celebrity, but I do get paid to do mortgages. Elizabeth, I appreciate you, appreciate your feedback on that and all of your patronage. Gang, hope you have an absolutely wonderful weekend. Call me if you need anything, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.